Gary, welcome to Capital Radio.
Thank you very much. Nice
Once
to be
again.
back.
It always happens, doesn't it? You know, thank you for coming to Capital Radio, and it's nice to be back, but it really is nice to see you back. What's been happening since Corridors of Power?
Well, I've been all over the world since then, promoting the album, and I've been in the studio recording my second album, Victims of the Future.
How long did this album take?
The new one took about 10 weeks, which was quite a lot longer than the last one. Due to some teething troubles we had in the studio. We were using a new studio this time, and they had a few problems, so we got a bit behind on the old schedule for a while, but it turned out okay in the end.
Tell us something about teething troubles in studios, for instance. I mean, because when people hear this new album, Victims of the Future, they might like to know what some of the teething troubles were.
Well, we were using a studio called Sarm West, which was originally the old Island Studios in Basing Street in London. And they put all this new equipment in and stuff, you know, which didn't work properly. So we had a lot of breakdowns, and consequently, we couldn't get things down as fast as we wanted to. You know, there was a lot of hanging around for the first 2 weeks and stuff, you know. And it had quite a detrimental effect on the people in the band at one point. You know, nobody felt like playing, you know, because every time we'd start to record something, everything would fall apart and we'd have to start again. And it was just driving us all nuts, you know. But
tell me something, as a musician and as collective musicians on this album, how do you pick yourself up from a situation like that? Is it terribly difficult? Or?
Well, really, you have to take a break for a couple of days and kind of almost treat it like starting all over again, you know. The closer you get involved and the more you get involved in it, the harder it is to really see clearly what's going wrong. So we just, you know, took a few days off and let the engineers get in there and strip it all down and start again, you know. And that seemed to work.
You virtually go back to square one, yeah?
Yeah, we did, yeah.
And pick yourself up and start all over again. Yeah. The album, you say, took something like 10 weeks to make. How long was the preparatory period of songwriting?
Not that long this time. It was quite a lot shorter than Corridors of Power, which was written over a period of probably 6 months or a year or something like that. But this time the songs were written over about 6 or 8 weeks, having returned from America and starting from scratch rather than sort of writing while I was on tour and everything. Because everything that I did have before the American tour, I scrapped, and I just, you know, came back and started fresh and worked on it from there.
Uh-huh. Your American tour also took in Japan, didn't it, I think?
Yeah, we went to Japan, America, Scandinavia, Europe, you know, did the whole circuit, as it were.
Gary, how long has it taken Japanese audiences to really latch on to Western rock music, do you think?
I think it's still quite new to them. You know, people say that, you know, there have been bands touring out there for the last sort of 10 years, but I think only the last 5 years has seen like a real upsurge in the enthusiasm they have over rock, and certainly over guitarists, because they're kind of guitar fanatics in Japan, which is why we do so well there.
There's always the interviewer's question to a rock musician, and indeed to any musician at all, as to how audiences react, or do they react differently from abroad as they do here in the UK?
Yes, they do.
Is there any great difference? And if there is, can you tell us about it?
Sure. Well, the Japanese audience are the most peculiar, because when you go out there and play for them, the first thing you notice is that they're all sitting down very quietly and very respectfully while you're playing a song. And you think, we're not doing too well here. And then all of a sudden, at the end of the number, they all get up and go crazy. And it's like this kind of controlled hysteria. And then they all sit down again, and they listen to the next song, and then it follows, and then at the end of the night, they just go bananas. But it's all kind of very controlled and contained, you know. Whereas in America, they just go absolutely wally, you know, all the time. They never shut up while you're playing or not, you know. They just go
of course, I think that may well be because of Japanese discipline,
yes,
in their youth, and which is a kind of a tradition of theirs, isn't it? I mean, you know how Japanese bow to you and all that sort of thing.
Well, it's partly that, and they don't want to get a lot of audience noise on the tapes that they're making of your show.
Why is that?
Well, they all like to record everything, you know, and put out lots of bootlegs and stuff like that. So they don't want to get too much noise on it.
On the subject of bootleg records, when you find that people have recorded your stuff unofficially or illegally, does this worry you tremendously? Or?
No, it's very flattering. I think it's bad, you know, economically, obviously, and all that, but really, there's nothing you can do about it. There really isn't, you know. I mean, it's going to happen, and when it starts to happen, I always take it as a sign that you're sort of going somewhere, you know, because they wouldn't do it if you were a totally unknown person, you know. They kind of do it when you're starting to be successful. So that's nice.
Gary, how do you think that you have progressed yourself as a musician? as a virtuoso of the guitar?
I don't know if I'm virtuoso of the guitar, but I think I've learned to control my playing a lot more over the years. I used to be very frantic, both as a person and as a musician, and I think, over the years I've kind of learned to control that a bit more, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then I think on the new album, the guitar playing on that is probably more controlled than anything I've done before. It's a lot more disciplined, but it's still got that edge to it that I've always wanted to put across in my playing. So I like to think that it's not as frantic and out of proportion as it used to be.
Yeah. I see that with this brand new album too. I see that Tommy's gone and Neil's gone and Neil Carter's back and Craig Gruber's back. A kind of change of personnel. Is that experimentation, or is that because you felt that you needed a change of musicians for the new album, or what?
Well, the changes all evolved quite naturally. I did have a singer in the band last year, a guy called John Sloman, who was with Uriah Heep.
Uriah Heep, yeah.
People like that, and I just felt that...
I think he was with Lone Star, wasn't he, at one stage?
Right.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. And he seemed to feel uncomfortable in the band because it was such a guitar-dominated band.
Yeah.
And he didn't really know what to do with himself when I was doing all the guitar bit and everything, and he sort of stood around on stage and he didn't really feel very comfortable. And plus he wasn't singing the songs that I'd written any better than I would have, so in the end it seemed pointless having a singer there, and I decided to take it on myself.
Has there ever been any slight feeling of envy from Gary Moore when somebody else is singing his songs?
No, not at all. I mean, I prefer it if there is a singer there doing all the singing and I can just concentrate on the guitar playing, because it's a hell of a job doing both things with the kind of music that I write and the intensity that we work at on stage.
Oh.
It's like, you're on while you're singing, and then you're on, you're playing, and you never get a moment to breathe. I mean, it really is quite demanding at that level of intensity. If I could find a singer who could interpret the songs better than I could and who was capable of handling an audience properly, that they'd have a job.
I would have always thought that any lead singer in the rock business would be actually quite thrilled to be complimented by a great song written by yourself, or indeed written by anybody, and in fact to have all that rather virtuosic guitar playing around him anyway.
It's just a matter of knowing what to do. I mean, a lot of singers, they get a bit embarrassed when they're not actually singing, and they can't stand there with their hands in their pockets. So, either they go out and shake their bums, or they grab a tambourine and look silly or whatever. It would be great for me if I could find someone who could play and sing, like a Glenn Hughes type person who's a great bass player, who also has a great voice, and then you've got no sort of dead weight or passengers. That's like my ideal situation, really.
Yeah, sure. Gary, when you decide that you're going to make a personnel change, because of making a new album, or in fact because of touring, how difficult is that search? I mean, is it a long search?
It can be, yeah. The last change that we made was on the bass player, and Craig Gruber, who's now the bass player, was actually the first guy that we auditioned, but we had like a pile of tapes. We had like 200 people or so applied for the job, and he came along, and I'd heard about him from other people, and I got a tape of him, and I was really pleased with what he did, and he came in and had a bash, and that was it. So I didn't have to go through that thing, but I have been in situations, such as in Colosseum 2, where we went through 55 keyboard players in 6 months, and it took us 6 months to find Don Airy, and he was the last one to come along. And it was incredible, because some of those people were in there for 3 weeks, like not, play a 12 bar and out the door again. So it can be a real pain sometimes.
When you have to go through all those auditions, say for a bass player, and some of them are really quite notoriously bad.
Yeah.
How do you put it to them? What do you actually say to them? Because I mean, do you reply to each one who auditions?
Well, you just say, leave your name in the bin on the way out or whatever.
Yeah.
We'll let you know or whatever. And I mean, they can tell, I think.
Do you ever have to cast aside somebody that is, in fact, very talented and very promising, but they don't just quite fit?
Yeah, sometimes that'll happen as well. Sometimes a guy will walk in and you just don't like the look of him or the way he talks or his attitude, and you can tell that he's going to be a problem on the road because he's got like too big an ego or he drinks too much or whatever, So you have to take all those things into consideration. It's not just how they can play.
This may be a misguided thought on my part, but I thought that something like a good 10 years ago we'd almost reached, or we had reached a zenith in recording and in production. And I have a feeling that that is why we got back to punk rock, to go back to original roots and have a bit of rawness in the music.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the kids who started all the punk thing wanted to shake the whole music industry up. That was the intention behind it, and I think they did, because, although everyone was very cynical at the time and said, oh, none of these guys can play, it's all rubbish, it just didn't go away. I mean, all the bands that are around now are products of those bands, all your sort of Thompson Twins and people like this,
sure,
and all the kind of synth bands. They all grew up out of that movement, and of course it's here to stay, as we know. But I think it was good that people realised that it was becoming too stale, and there were all these old geezers sitting out in the country in the big houses, that didn't even bother to pick up a guitar except when they went on tour. They didn't care about the music anymore, and they were just, all the money was rolling in, and that whole kind of complacency had set in. And I think it needed that shake-up, really.
Yeah.
It's a good thing.
Yes, I think that had we not gone back, we'd have got past the zenith, and there would have been really no further to go, because going back there and going to a raw kind of music, you have that chance. I think even musicians who are very accomplished and very polished, they have a chance of regenerating, rethinking, and repolishing and getting into bigger projects, as the younger bands indeed have, right?
Sure. I think what happens is a lot of the musicians that have been around for a long time will spread their energies in different directions, as you said, getting into video and stuff like that, and production and producing other people and stuff. And the bands that are around now are they concentrate their energies in a different way from what bands 10 years ago. It's not now down to how fast you can play the guitar or how heavy you can be. It's like how good an image can you put across to people, how good an advertising agency you can become, and how you can market the whole thing. So it is progressing, but we can't apply the old kind of rules to new bands.
Do you think it's a little sad that that we have to today think in terms of advertising agencies and marketing and the right kind of video?
It's just a reflection of what's happened to the whole world, really, because there's so much pressure on people now. If they want to be successful, they have to be so competitive, and that means they've got to know more than how to play a guitar or how to stand up and sing. They've got to know how the business works. They've got to know how to market themselves, how to promote themselves, and how to keep one step ahead of the next guy all the time.
You are very right about the pressures of the 1984s. I mean, they are tremendous. And when Gary Moore is absolutely pressurized beyond belief, what does one Gary Moore do to cope with this situation?
I don't know. It depends on the situation. If I'm on tour and things start kind of piling up, as they do, you've got another 300 interviews to do tonight before the show, you sort of, sometimes you can get a bit wound up. But I like to think that I can release all those pressures through the gig, just through playing the guitar, which I seem to be able to do. It's great, because when I don't play for a long time, don't play a show, I get very wound up in myself, and I don't communicate very well with people. I just kind of want to go out and play, and that's the only thing I'm interested in. As soon as I get out and play again, I feel great, and I feel like, right, the pressure is actually off me now. Once I've done like 1 or 2 shows, I'm back to myself again.
Yeah. Gary, it's been wonderful talking to you again.
Thank you very much.
God bless you. Go on your merry way, and don't fret as you go up and down the frets, all right?
Very well put.
Ta-da.